Alright, everybody, today we're going to be looking at Mythic Croesus. Now, for this fight, I was wearing the Dark Moon Promises and an Amalgamum 7th Spine for trinkets. I'm also wearing in this fight the two-piece from Archway and Court of Stars, the neck and the ring, which is the demon damage. And what's interesting to note about that two-piece is that actually did 18% on my healing in this fight, so it's incredibly powerful for Disc Priest, and I highly recommend anyone who wants to progress on Mythic Croesus especially to definitely go pick up that two-piece. Now, another thing to note about this fight is that I only had access to one Innovate, and I actually decided after a couple of attempts to give up the Blessing of Wisdom and give it to our Resto Druid. And this was even when our Resto Druid isn't very geared with Paragons. I think he's like 40 Paragons and is like 898 or something. So he's not very geared at all, in respective to, say, what I am. But this was the actual, kind of the winning decision. So what this meant for me as my healing as a Disc Priest in this was to just be a burst healer. So every single time Shadow Fiend was up, every single time Light's Wrath was up, I wanted to make sure that I was putting out as much healing as possible, and then not worrying too much about being an actual throughput healer constantly throughout the fight. We left that to our Resto Druid. Now, another thing to note is that because we did 4 heal this, we had 2 Holy Paladins and a Disc Priest. I was doing about 200k DPS at the end. Both Holy Paladins did about 150k DPS, and our Resto Druid did about 100k DPS. So between those, we made up the DPS check, which was pretty much key to making this fight. We were 3 healing it to begin with. A DPS couldn't make it tonight, so we decided to 4 heal and figured out we could actually make the DPS check, as long as all the healers contributed. And, that's lying where Disc Priest is incredibly powerful. So, props to all the healers, being able to keep up, a very significant amount of damage. So you'll see at the start of the fight there, I use my Rapture very early to get it on cooldown. I use it for the first slam, and then I use my Light's Wrath. Later I call for an Innovate for a Slam Orb combo and use my Shadow Fiend with Estelle, which is the legendary chest. And that legendary chest allows me to get about 40% increased haste for Shadow Fiend when it's out 5 seconds, and it'll instantly top up one of the... I think I use it for so I use it for the Slam Orb combo with an Innovate with the Shadow Fiend and the increased haste. And tops the raid throughout an entire phase there. So you'll see here, this is the most dangerous overlap for the fight. So at this point in the fight, you get a pitch, then you get an orb, then you get a slam, and then you get an orb, all in succession. So this is where we blow 1 aura, trank, and bubble, and then out of it, I should be using my Rapture very soon. So that point there, it's super important you get the barrier down because it will mitigate a heap of damage. I'm also wearing Nero, so I wasn't too worried about getting Atonement out on everybody to be healing because, with all the healing cooldowns going off, we did have enough, and just my Penance was enough to, contribute to that point in the fight. So you can see here that I will be using my Rapture before this orb hits, so we can get some healing before the orb. So this is another overlap here, so this is an orb into a slam. So I should be getting, so this will be my Light's Wrath. So I try and pair up either an Innovate, so I try and pair up my Innovates with Shadow Fiend, and then I pair up generally my Raptures with my Light's Wrath. It would be more ideal if I had double Innovates. I can use, I can get a bigger Light's Wrath, say with 20 people. But again, so for me, I have 1 Innovate, no Blessing of Wisdom, so it's pretty much all about being consistent with what cooldowns I have and not being a big throughput healer. I'm just doing bursts when I can, and I'm going to go through the logs after this fight and show you what I mean by being a burst healer. That there's some overlaps in this fight that are really dangerous, which is where I try to be using my burst healing, and I think that is a very big success to the fight. Success to how we were healing it, especially for healing it. And especially without, say, like a Resto Shaman, where something like Link or even Healing Tide Totem can be very powerful in preventing some of those deaths. So right now is where it gets more interesting at the end of the fight. So you'll see here that I should be using Innovate now. I get out Powered Radiances. I should plea at the end of this. No, I don't. There you go. I plea for 14 stacks, and I should be throwing out my Shadow Fiend once the damage is about to come. That was actually a very bad Innovate there. There you go. there's a mistake I made. So that Innovate was called at a bad time. I should have called it for about now when this Orb and Slam is coming up. Good thing I didn't use my Shadow Fiend here, so I should be just burning some mana here to heal everybody up. The Shadow, so Shadow Fiend and Light's Wrath there. So, and I should. Now another mistake I make in this fight is I don't actually use my second barrier. So for this, you'll see this next orb coming up. This is where I should be using my barrier, so you can see there's an orb and a slam overlap. I think at this point it was more, you can hear me on the comms, I'm calling out to Trank. I should have recognized that I had barrier up, that would have been a huge amount of healing, especially because I am wearing Neros in this fight. But yeah, we all make mistakes, and that's just how it is. So at this point, just making sure we're keeping calm. I know we got double beams coming up, and we got orb finishing at the end, and easy kill. We make the DPS check with I think 8 seconds to spare. So for 4 healing, we had a huge amount of damage, and I think that it can be contributed completely to the healers. We did have some pretty good DPS, but all the healers, I think we had between us about 600k DPS between all the healers. So that essentially makes up the DPS, and that's what caused us to be successful in this fight. Alright, so what I will do is go over some logs now, and I'll try and show you about what I mean by the burst healing. Alright, and we're back. So the first thing I'd like to point out, so we are 4 healing. So you can see me, 189k DPS, 114, 108, and 70k. So it's not as much as I actually thought it was, but it is, still very significant. So we add that up, about 400, 470. So almost a DPS there from our healers still. We have 2 really high damage tanks as well, which does, really, really help. So that's essentially how we had the DPS to kill the boss with 4 healers. And as well, like our DPS isn't exceptionally high at all. So, that was kind of our success for that fight. So if we have a look at the healing now, as I said, we had our, Resto Druid, not the most geared at all. But and pretty under gear, top healing. We made sure he had the double blessing wisdoms to make sure that he was the throughput king for the fight. So if we have a look at my healing, you'll see what I mean by just the consistent burst healing for certain overlaps. So if we have a look at we go buffs, what we can do is we can pin our innovates and raptures, and we can see how that kind of correlates with what our healing was. So if we go to innovate, we can pin that with this button here. We can also go to rapture and pin that too. And as we go back to our healing, so you can see the first rapture, we get out a Light's Wrath there, big amount of healing. Then our next innovate, we get there, that is with the Shadow Fiend. Now you can see here that this rapture again, actually what I'll do is I will pull up, and this eventually loads. Welcome to Australian internet, everybody. So we'll pin Shadow Fiend, and we can pin Light's Wrath. Alright, and that should give us a better idea. We can also pin Barrier. Alrighty, so zoom out a bit. So you can see how the healing lines up there. So we have, what's this one? So this should be our Rapture with the Light's Wrath, and then we have an Innovate with the Shadow Fiend. Then we have the Barrier. You can see the healing coming out from this. This is just going to be from Neros, and because I don't think we had too many atonements up at this point either. So most of this healing done here is just from Neros. Then we also have Rapture with a Light's Wrath at the end of it. Then we have this Wasted Innovate up here. You can see we still did a decent chunk of healing at this point, but this was mainly because of the spells coming after it. If you saw, I innovated about 5 seconds too early for the combo that was coming up. So I still did have some atonements left on the target when the overlap was coming, but it wasn't, if that was delayed 5-10 seconds, so it was for that overlap, You know, I could have gotten out a Light's Wrath, which could have topped everybody. You know, and I would have wasted a whole lot less mana, had a lot more mana for the end of the phase, which would have been very helpful. So you can see there, I would have been bomb casting out Radiances, then I Light's Wrath and Shadow Fiend for the overlap, and then we get a Rapture coming up for the end, which is my last little spike of healing. So you can see how these cooldowns line up with the spikes in our healing, and then between it, I am literally not, you know, doing much at all. I'm making sure I cast Powered Shield on cooldown, or at least trying my best to do that. You can see I bring up overall the Powered Shield. You can see it's pretty consistent. You know, there is a few gaps in there, which is, you know, points of improvement for me, and you can see the Raptures are how I'm getting out a lot of Powered Shield. So you can also see here in some of the points, I'm not Powered Shielding consistently together. You can see, I mean, this was through heroes, so there's a lot more Powered Shields there. This was, you know, a lot more consistent, but here I missed about 2 globals of Powered Shields. And that actually stems from a problem I have with the sound trigger. So I have, if anybody's seen my videos, I actually have a trigger that goes off when Powered Shield comes off cooldown, which just plays a sound, and that cues me then to use Powered Shield. Sometimes when I Rapture, that sound doesn't work properly with the cooldown resetting, and I kind of miss, like, I'll miss a global, or I cast Powered Shield twice on the same target, or something like that. So it is something I need to actually find a fix for, because, you know, for me, audible cues are a pretty big thing to my gameplay, and, you know, this is essentially what it stems from. You know, as from a skill level, pressing Powered Shields on different targets isn't hard to do at all. So that's, you know, that's again an area of improvement. But you can see we're pretty consistent with our Powered Shield usage. You know, there is gaps here where I, you know, could be squeezing, you know, one more in, but it's mostly consistent. But again, that's exactly the point of looking at your logs, is to analyze what you did and where you can improve. So I know that I can be doing better with, you know, getting more barriers down. I could have improved on that Innovate in the end. I could also improve on my Powered Shields. You know, and also, you know, we could have also improved on where we're casting Fade. You know, Fade's a pretty strong defensive cooldown on a 30-second cooldown, so it's pretty good to use. So what I did want to look at was overall cast. So there is times, you know, these bars won't show it, but I think from the actual video you'll notice that there is points in the fight where I'm literally not doing anything, and I think that should show in the activity. So, okay, 98% is still pretty high, but there is points in the fight, because I know my mana is pretty tight, that I'm not casting anything. I'm not powered radiancing, I'm not, you know, I'm not playing, I'm not even shielding at some points. And that is purely just because I don't have access to the mana. If I had access to 2 Innovates and a Blessing of Wisdom, or even 2 Blessing of Wisdoms, my healing would be a lot higher. Obviously, if we dropped a healer, my healing would be a lot higher. And it was a lot higher when we were 3 healing. I was getting up, you know, I was getting to about 900k HPS, and even over at some points. So you can see here the strength of our 7th Spine Trinket restored a fairly significant amount of mana. Again, if we compare this to what a Blessing of Might is, you know, it is a good trinket. Obviously, mana is a good thing, but that I think that kind of highlights then how strong, again, Blessing of Wisdom is for the Disc Priest especially, and for every healer. Again, Blessing of Wisdom is a crazy powerful spell. And the last thing I wanted to show you was the Archway 2 piece that I wanted to talk about. So when we go to my healing, you can expand down this little atonement box, and you'll see March of the Legion here did 40 million healing for me in this fight. You know, that is quite a lot. So, you know, considering it did 5% of my damage overall, and just 20% of my healing. So it obviously, I did get some pretty good RNG in this fight for when March of the Legion obviously procced, which is why the healing for it is so high. But Yeah, Martial Legion. Very, very, very powerful in this fight. So, I hope you all learnt something about my kind of philosophy around how I was playing Disc on this fight, how we managed to actually 4-heal this fight, and, you know, how it was successful. Alright, well, thanks for watching, and have a great day.